Mm. I mean, I suppose, in a sense, when I think of sort of Greek myths, like I also think of kind of, they are in a sense allegorical to some degree. I mean, they involve a kind of temporal displacement where we're supposed to be thinking about a larger societal context. I mean, even though in a way a lot of that original intended allegorical import, so that illustrative quality, is unreconstructible to us. We have to, in a way, become social historian anthropologists to really make an attempt to do that. I mean, do you feel that there's a kind of urgent connection? I mean, like as it were, between what this play is representing, its space of mythic characters, and what is happening sort of today in our socioeconomic climate. I mean, I talk to all sorts of people, and they say, this is the worst time ever, and blah blah blah. And you have your own ideas of history, I know from our previous conversations. But where does kind of this story of Jason fit into the stories that we are telling now? The kind of characters that we're discussing now.
Well,
it's a broad question.
As the writer of them, I can say that what I want to do is make it applicable for then, for now, for the future, to give enough leeway that you can slip something in and get something out of it. If you look at, I mean, and great works will do that. You don't have to live in 1860 and know a bit about the whaling industry to appreciate Moby Dick. You don't have to know about mid-20th century.
It's like you were saying, that's like you were saying in a previous conversation where we were talking about Moby Dick. A kind of modern analog for the people of the Pequod could be sort of the crypto entrepreneurs of today. People on Wall Street or what have you. That sort of thing. Like if you think about sort of the leaders and I suppose the political dynasties today. I mean, you have Putin, and you have erstwhile Trump and what have you. I mean, these are kind of similarly, I suppose you could call them conflicted, slightly sort of figures struggling with history in a way, and with kind of their own sense of self-importance.
I think one of the things that if you try to put things into a modern context, you have to try to do what I was doing, and I think I succeed. I know I succeed with these plays and with other stuff I've done, is that you have to take the stuff that doesn't work and replace it with stuff that, you have to, if you have a contraption that you want to restore, like these cable TV shows we have here in America, where someone finds a piece of junk in a junkyard and they spend $2,000 to restore something so they can sell it for $10,000 to some collector. That's what you need to do here with the art. Because if you don't do that, like with comic books, things become increasingly absurd and ridiculous. I was just reading, do you know what a Boltzmann brain is?
No.
Okay, so there was a guy in the late 19th century, I forget his first name, he was Eastern European, but named Boltzmann, and he came up with this idea that given the huge complexity of the universe, the 19th century idea of the universe, not even what we know now, which is far grander, given the complexity of the universe of his time, he thought it would be much more likely that spontaneously in a vacuum, a brain would appear, and this brain would fill itself, its own backstory of its own life and its own universe, that was more likely than the universe itself coming into being and millions or billions of years going by and individuals having a society and whatnot. So it became a point of sort of ridicule for other scientists that they would refer to Boltzmann brains. Well, what's the odds of us living in a Boltzmann brain or being part of
like a brain in the jar.
What's the odds of that versus reality being so? And most people put it off. Now there are a handful of scientists today or philosophers, and this shows how far philosophy has fallen and why it's so far out of favor, who have taken this up as being somehow maybe even possible. Well, I don't want to get sidetracked there, but this is the equivalent where you have uh, writers or artists of some kind doing really absurd things. Like, for example, here in the U.S., there was a recent Pulitzer Prize-winning book 6, 7 years ago, written by a black fellow. I forget the name of the guy, who wrote a book called The Underground Railroad, in which the Underground Railroad to get slaves from safe house to safe house, from the South to the North to Canada, to freedom in the 19th century, how this might have actually been an underground train. And this is the kind of just real stupid shit that happens in art, and it reminded me of the Bolson Brain, and it only came to me yesterday or this morning when I woke up, because I had a dream of a person I knew, and this came to mind. I looked it up. I'm like, oh, that's what that meant. So you have to redo things, but you have to, I think, bring them into a kind of reality that people can associate with. Like I said, something can fail. Like I was just going to talk about Death of a Salesman, and how Death of a Salesman, you don't have to live in the mid 20th century and know about insurance sales then or now to appreciate that. But I think I might have mentioned to you before, I've said it before, I think one of the biggest failings of that play is the character of Biff Loman, fucking up his life for 20 years because he found his father with a hooker. It makes no logical sense. He should be angry at his father. He shouldn't take that anger and turn it inward towards himself. This is the kind of characterization that happens in a lot of the Greek tales, where we have these Julian Jaynes-like, zombie-like characters. It makes no rational sense for that character in the 20th century to do that to himself. But that in and of itself is not, while I think that's an error dramatically, it's not a Boltzmann brain kind of error where someone goes so over the top, where this is all the imaginings of Biff Loman as he's a character from 5,000 years from now reading a book or something. So you have to take the stuff, the Medea thing, turn it around so that not only does it become more natural, but it loses the veneer, the patina of paternalism, of chauvinism, of sexism that is rife within the idea of her killing her own kids.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there. I mean, what the thing that I was thinking of was, when I look at other people trying now to adapt Greek myth, and I already mentioned recently that there were these, I think around about 2009 to 2012, there were these big budget studio adaptations of, the Perseus myth, of, ostensibly remakes of Clash of the Titans. And the way that they represented kind of myth, kind of, the mythic space of, classical heroes and what have you, was as superheroes. Basically they represented kind of, the gods and what have you, swinging lightning bolts with capes, and as action film stars, saving the world and all this sort of stuff. And it's just that I suppose, artistically it's not very interesting to me, but anthropologically, sort of sociologically, it is rather telling, to think that kind of like the way in which we kind of make sense of that sort of stuff, is on the one hand to sensationalize it, but also, that's the only way that we can kind of make that sort of stuff fit for a contemporary audience in our world, as kind of a big spectacle, that in a way it's too abstract. We have to make it into something basically, basically that the old gods become literally more like those Jack Kirby alien superhero gods in our retelling of them. And that seems almost like, as you were saying with your analogy about the Underground Railroad, an extremely exquisitely literalist move, artistically.
Well, what I said earlier, I said about the use of drama. If I was going to do a novel, it's easy to go big in a novel because you can do just about anything. But within drama, And I'll go back to the Talos. Talos appears in a scene that's only maybe about 10 sentences long. We just
Mm.
hear him and the characters running, and we just hear. And I even said it has to sound like the beginning of the first Godzilla movie in 1954. Just boom, boom,
Mm.
boom, the foot. So the giant stuff, the big stuff, the spectacle has been reduced to just some, someone banging on a wash tub or whatever might be used by some local theater to give the
Yeah.
effect of a giant metal guy. So even though I've done a lot of reworking, you bring it down to the human level, and this is where it gets to the idea of picking the right medium for what you do. If I had wanted to try, let's say, if in 5, 10 years I go back to poetry again, maybe if I hadn't written this play, I might say, well, maybe I should redo the Argonautica in a poetry form. But no, this was the right at the time. This is you asked earlier, why do you do this here? Are you repeating yourself? But this was the right form to do it in because of that. Because drama forces one to look inward at the characters, and
Yeah.
and so the giant bronze man, we don't even see a giant foot, on stage just going up and down, boom, boom, boom. We just hear like boom, boom, boom. But we're mostly in the minds of the author. We're in the minds of the gods that with their playthings. We're in the minds of Jason, and so on and so forth. So this was the right medium for me to do that.
It's especially germane to the space of theatre as well. I mean, I feel like perhaps we, or at least I tend to neglect that in our conversations about your plays, sort of the specific discontinuous space of theatre, and kind of the whole, the fact that this is happening on a stage, not a screen, but through actors and what have you. And I think it's interesting to see you thinking about that element of mise en scène within the theatre proscenium. You are more often than not, you do tend to go for quite, or what should we say, sort of Spartan kind of stage setting. You choose to imply rather than show, sort of, and again, maybe that's a question of economy, of kind of like, you don't want to require too much of materially, you don't want to require too much of the theatre production or the actors, but also it's perhaps better to sort of leave open things.
Well, it all depends too, because I've done this in novels too. In my book, the one where I have the Jessica characters taking away the levels, I have some scenes that start off with things in the middle of a scene. Something happens. We're just told briefly about it, but the action that would be central in a film adaptation, especially a Hollywood film adaptation, has already happened. Now we're in the interstices between the action. In my big long sci-fi book where I redo a Philip Dick short story there, I sometimes have the captain, coming back to the spaceship. We spent the last 3 days underground battling the so-and-so aliens. Now we're back at the ship, and that's how it starts. We don't need to see that. Because that was dealing with heroes, anti-heroes, superheroes. We don't need to see every incident that this does. And in the same way, the form of drama, the theater, enforces that upon you.